Item number 17, public hearing and first passage to contractually rezone the property at 209 Webster Street from the Neighborhood Conservation A District to the Office Residential District. Requested action to approve first passage of the amendment to the Zoning and Land Use Code and map to contractually rezone the property at 209 Webster Street from the Neighborhood Conservation A District to the Office Residential District, subject to a contractual agreement, and to continue the public hearing for final passage to the next regularly scheduled City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Council Cludia, seconded by Councilor Lysen. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Given the absence of the councilor from Ward 2, his request was to table this item until the next scheduled meeting in August, and I will honor that request and make a motion to table this meeting to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council.
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
And I don't believe that's debatable.
So the motion before you, because it's been moved and seconded, is to postpone this matter to the August 15th meeting. It is actually debatable, Counselor, only for the purpose of discussing the date in mind. Is the August meeting appropriate? Is the September meeting, for whatever the case? But you're right in the sense that the debate is only limited to that particular matter of the motion and not for the proposed rezoning topic.
And thank you, Kathy. And what is the next scheduled meeting for
The
this council?
August 15th and then September 5th.
So August 15th would be the date of the motion to table.
Yes.
Until.
Yes. So that is the motion before the council, Mr. Mayor. It's debatable in the sense of just regarding the merits of the motion to table the matter to the August 15th meeting.
Council Cludia.
So just to clarify that, we can debate why we wouldn't support the motion to table, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So that's where I'm going to go with this. So I respect Councilor LaJoy. I respect his opinion. This is a first passage and a second passage item. So every single councilor on this council, whether they're here tonight or here on August 15th, will get a chance to say their piece on this item. I'm not insinuating that this is Councilor LaJoy's purpose, but I don't think that we get to set aside items that we don't feel we have the votes to support because we're not present at the meeting. So I might feel differently about that if this were something we were voting on once, but it is something we're voting on twice. And so I would not support a motion to table this time.
Yeah, the public is here too. I mean, I think they should have a chance to speak on the issue without it being tabled, and I think that it's going to need 2 readings. So even if it comes on the 15th, we'll have to come back for the second reading again, correct, Kathy?
Yes, yes.
So tonight, regardless of what action is taken, it's not final unless it's in a negative way. I know it's a controversial issue, but I do want to hear from some of the people, especially about some of the findings that the planning board made. And they're here, and I think we ought to continue with the public hearing.
Any further discussion? Call the roll.
So again, just for clarification, the motion before you is to postpone this matter to the August 15th City Council meeting. Councilor from Ward 7?
Yes.
Ward 1?
No.
Ward 3?
No.
Ward 4?
Yes.
Ward 5?
No.
Ward 6?
Yes.
And Mr. Mayor.
No.
So the motion failed. It received a vote of 3-4. So the tabling motion did not pass. So the motion before you is the matter that is printed in your book, which is to approve first passage.
Okay. Any discussion? We already had you've read the motion, right?
Yes, I'd be happy to read it again if you'd like for
No,
clarification.
if you said
Okay.
you did, I forgot.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Yes.
I'd like maybe Gil and or other staff to make an update on the status, please.
Gil Arsenault, Director of Planning and Code Enforcement. There's some history here, so I'm going to walk through it very, very briefly. I think most of you know it, but back in November 2016, Louis Willett submitted a petition to rezone this property. It's shown on the map. It's just over 2.1 acres. He has other holdings as well. That's in the office residential. The area that we're talking about is Neighborhood Conservation A District, essentially a single-family district. And the request is at that time, was to straight rezone it to office residential to support a multifamily development. That wasn't approved by the planning board. So Mr. Willett brought his project back to the planning board in December of 2016 with a conditional rezoning. We refer to those as contract rezonings at this point. Essentially the same project you're looking at tonight, with the exception that he didn't specifically make it clear, stipulate, if you will, that the target population would be senior citizens, people 55 and above. That project was unanimously approved by the planning board as a recommendation. It's the planning board's role to make a recommendation on a rezoning to the city council, which is what they did. In January 3rd of 2017, the city council voted 4-3 in opposition to the conditional rezoning. Then the following meeting on the 17th, there was a reconsideration, and essentially the project was sent back to the planning board, and we just spoke to that at the last agenda item. With respect to that, the project that you're looking at tonight is essentially the same project, potentially as many as 40 apartments for seniors. It is 55 years and older. That's clear. That's part of the contract rezone. And Mr. Willett has also agreed that he'd be more than happy to have anything recorded in the registry of deeds to that effect, if that's of consequence to people. But it's a 55 older project, if you will. Talking one structure. Sebago Technics did do a wetland delineation. There was some question about the wetlands and is there a vernal pool, is there not a vernal pool? So a soil scientist, a professional from Sebago, good firm, did the work. There's just over 10,000 square feet of wetlands. There is no vernal pool. As a matter of right, via a permit by rule, which is essentially a no permit situation, 4,300 square feet of that wetland could be filled. Conceivably, the entire wetland could be filled. There again, what I'm talking about is something that would occur if this project is approved by the council, because this would require planning board approval. Notice would be given to the public. The planning board would conduct a public hearing on that project. Traffic was looked at as well. There was some concern that traffic might be an impact. These types of projects generate very little traffic, despite the fact that you could have as many as 40 units for senior housing. And the peak hour, which is 7 to 8 in the morning, and then 4 to 5 in the evening, it was 2 trips, it was 4 trips. Worst case scenario, during the middle of the day, it was still a very small number. There again, if this project makes its way to the planning board, traffic needs to be looked at. The planning board would need to make a finding that traffic is not an issue. The project, as discussed, would be such that traffic would exit and enter the property via Webster Street. It would not go out onto East Avenue. There was a question also about bus. There was also a question about bus service to that location. We have spoken to our friends over at AVCOG, LACT, and that probably will not happen. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen in the future, but for this project, it probably wouldn't happen. But the folks that live there could likely avail themselves to some paratransit bus service. In any event, at this point in time, the council is looking at this conditional rezoning. The recommendation from the planning board, the recent recommendation, was 6 in favor and 1 against. The 1 vote in opposition was relative to the height of the building. In the NCA zoning district, the maximum height of a building is 35 feet, excuse me. That can be increased by 25%, whether you're building a single-family home or doing a church or whatever you're doing, that you can do as a matter of right in that zoning district. So Mr. Willett is asking for a building that's 43 feet 9 inches high versus the 35. And 1 member of the planning board, as I understand, didn't like the height at 43 feet 9 inches, so he voted against it. But as I understand other aspects of the project, were very well received by the planning board. You have a very positive recommendation by the planning board. At this point in time, it's up to the council to make the hard decision. Is this conditional contract zone, I should say, something that should be approved? If so, it goes to the planning board. If not, then that may be the end of the project. Excuse me.
Thank you. Yes.
So, Gil, in relation to the height of the building, you said something about a 20%.
Yeah, we have the ability currently to modify setbacks, modify height, building height. In the NCA, you can build a house that's 35 feet tall. But you could increase that. You could go up to almost 44 feet. And Mr. Willett would like a pitched roof on his building versus a flat roof because he thinks it's going to fit in better with the neighborhood. That's why he needs the extra height.
So the 43.9, though, falls within.
Absolutely. That's something you could do as a matter of right with a single-family home in the NCA.
Thank you.
Councilor Lachance.
And Gil, a question. When was the wetland study conducted?
That was recent. Take me a minute to find it. It was in May of this year.
Middle, end of the month?
See if I can get you an actual date.
A date, I'm asking for a specific date. I appreciate it.
I'm looking for a date on the plan. I'm not seeing it. I know it was done in May. And if we had a vernal pool, the date is absolutely critical because you really need to do a delineation of a vernal pool. It's actually called Big Night. There's a window of opportunity. It's typically when you hear tree frogs, peepers, if you will. And that's a 2-week window where you have to go in and do an analysis. But there is no vernal pool on this property. Wetland, but no vernal pool.
And as you said, the date is critical, and May 1st versus May 25th is a huge difference.
Well, actually, it's not
Depending
critical
on
if
the
it's not if there's no vernal pool. The date is critical if you have a vernal pool, because a distinction needs to be made between a significant vernal pool versus a vernal pool, because the setback requirements change.
So you don't have a date specific?
I do. I could probably dig it out. I just having difficulty finding it this second.
You could sometime within the meeting. Thanks.
Yep, absolutely. But to repeat, the time isn't critical in this case because there is no vernal pool.
Gil, could you comment on there is wetlands, obviously 10,000 square feet.
Yep, just over 10,000 square feet.
Okay, could you talk about what the state requirement and what the local requirement is there with respect to filling? And because you made a couple comments.
Yeah, as a matter of right, because it's not a significant wetland.
And that's based upon square footage? It's not significant?
No, it's not the square footage. It's just the resource, if you will. It's not associated with a great pond. It's not associated with a river. It's not necessarily a high-value wetland. All wetlands are very important. But in this case, as a matter of right, any property owner could fill 4,300 square feet of that 10,000 square foot wetland. And with permitting, you could fill the entire wetland. And we don't know if it gets to that point what the developer will want to do as far as that wetland is concerned. But it's my understanding that there are some drainage issues associated with 209 Webster Street that impacts East Avenue properties. And making improvements on that property would likely help those folks.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And I'm going to slightly belabor this, Gil. You said there is no vernal pool. It's not an important
It's
item
not-
in,
it's not
in
significant.
that regard due to the conclusion of Sebago Techniques,
Yes.
and that's dependent on when they did that study.
No.
So if they would have come back and said there's a significant amount of marshy wetland in here, are you going by the state definition or by Sebago Techniques' conclusion? I think
No,
there's some
they're-
variables in here that we're not necessarily
Right.
getting.
Their license, the state sets the standards. Timing doesn't matter if you don't have a vernal pool. You could do your wetland delineation anytime.
And who decided that there is no vernal pool?
In this case, Sebago Technics made that call,
Based on their study of when they
based
did their
on their
study?
wetland delineation, based on their soil scientist, that did the research. There again, the planning board, with any finding they need to make, can bring in other experts. They can, if they so choose, hire, and we do it for traffic, when there's traffic movement permits. We typically will, did you find the date?
Well, there is no date, it's May, but it's meeting the standards
Right,
outlined
right.
by it.
Yeah, I knew it was May, I didn't know whether there was a
Right,
date on
and
it.
So I would think it would be important to know when they conducted that
We
study,
can get the-
or a field survey or something like that.
We can get the exact date,
And-
but my point is that it can be done any time of the year because there's no vernal pool. There's only a couple weeks
I
during the
understand your
year
point.
where a vernal pool, where you're counting fairy shrimp, where you're looking at salamanders, where you're looking at what constitutes a vernal pool.
I understand your point. I would also say you brought up a point about drainage. I know on Rosedale Street, when Rosedale Acres was put in 1973, the neighbors came down to City Hall. They said, no, we don't want this. The city asked them, what do you want us to do? Do you want this? The residents came down here and said, we don't want it. They built it anyway. They raised the entire elevation of that road, causing drainage issues for every house on the up end of that street. That wasn't looked at because it was more important to build that development. The development's been there for 35, 40 years, and that's the way it is. But at that time, they didn't consider it a big issue with drainage being a problem. And I can tell you right now, living on that street, when it rains for a week, we have a real drainage problem, and it's most every house on the up end of that street. Before they raised that street, the drainage was not an issue. So looking at this with the marshy wetland, it may not be a vernal pool, but there's a lot of water collecting in there. If you fill that in, the water has to go somewhere, whether it's coming off the topography near East Avenue or Boston Street or Moody, one of the other streets, that water has to go somewhere. So my concern, additionally, with what you brought up, was where is that water going to go? How is that going to impact the neighborhood houses in the area? And are we going to have to wait 25 years or even 5 years to find out what the impact
The
is?
standards have changed significantly over time. The developer, if it gets to that point, needs to have engineering undertaken. We want pre and post runoff to remain constant. We don't want any runoff issues whatsoever. And that can readily be achieved with engineering. Above and beyond the fact that they'll engage PEs, our own PEs will review their findings as well. So at the end of the day, I think wetlands, stormwater management are big cost drivers. And we look at them very seriously because we don't want impact off the site. We also don't want environmental degradation. But there again, we're sort of getting the cart before the horse. Because just because the zoning is in place doesn't mean a project can occur. Or maybe the size of the project isn't as large as a developer might like to see.
Thank you.
Councilor Bouchard.
So I wasn't going to say much till after the public comment, but I think I just want to set the stage for the people here a little bit and kind of let everyone know where I sit if you don't know already. We're going to talk about a lot of irrelevant things tonight. Relevant in the grand scheme, but completely irrelevant to a lot of the people sitting right here. Wetlands, vernal pools, height of a building, busing, and there's a need for senior housing in Lewiston in general. Honestly, I don't care what anybody's reason is. If you live there, if you're one of these abutting property owners, I don't care if your reason is you hate senior citizens. I don't agree with you, but it's your reason, it's your property. You bought a home in NCA, abutting woods. This was not supposed to be built behind you. I live on Garcelon Bog, same thing. I'd be sitting there if someone was trying to build something there. It's your home, it's your neighborhood. It's not like you bought abutting the Promenade Mall. I'd have to tell you tough cookies. Sorry. But you didn't. So if you get up here tonight and you tell me you don't care what the reason is, you just don't want this in your backyard, I'm not going to vote for it. And I hope the people here who asked you for your opinion, who wanted to hear you talk tonight, actually listen to you this time. And because I'm going to. That's where I sit.
Councilor Beam.
I'm going to belabor the issue of the vernal pool. It just sounded like a circular argument to me. I didn't understand what you were saying about it doesn't matter when they decide that it's not a vernal pool, but once they decide it's not a vernal pool, I mean, this is what I understood you to say. Once they decide it's not a vernal pool, then it does matter when they conduct the investigation to
Correct. If
find
you have a vernal pool,
animals.
there's essentially a 2-week window during the year. It's springtime. It's when we hear peepers, primarily. It's a small window. If it's a vernal pool, that's when the analysis must be taken. If there's no vernal pool, you don't need to be concerned with that 2-week window.
Who
And there's no
decides-
vernal pool.
Who decided there was no vernal pool?
Let me give you an
Wetland
example,
specialist.
because this is I can tell you about a project we just did.
You know what I'm
Those
saying?
poor peepers,
We just
they don't
had,
live in a vernal pool.
we
Excuse me.
just had a consulting group look at a piece of city property to do a wetlands and vernal pool survey. So they send out one of their scientists to do that. As was noted, you can do a wetland delineation any time of the year simply by evaluating the nature of the plants and the soils in an area. In the case of the property we were looking at, the individual doing the study identified that there was a vernal pool on the property. Because he was slightly past the window of required time, he identified it as a potentially significant vernal pool. You can only determine if it's a significant vernal pool within that 2-week window. But we do know there's a vernal pool there. All we don't know is whether it's significant or not. For purposes of that study, we can meet the standards, the setback standards for the significant vernal pool. So whether it is or isn't doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But what's at the base of it is whether the scientist, the engineer who goes out there and does the evaluation, identifies an area that is an actual vernal pool. Then you have to go out and evaluate that within that limited time period. Now, I don't know. We can certainly check on the dates to see if that fell within that time period. But if there was a vernal pool there, that would have been identified. And if it had been outside of that period, it would have been noted that it's required further evaluation. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor, and I apologize for interrupting you with my snide remark, but the point I was making was the peepers are there, and there's a habitat there that is potentially going to be wiped out. Whether it's a vernal pool or not, you just said it was a vernal pool.
I was talking about a totally different property in a different
Okay,
location.
so whether there's a vernal pool there or not, there is a significant amount of wildlife and habitat in that area. The significance of it is there, and the residents want it to be intact. To say that it doesn't matter because it's not deemed a vernal pool, why are we saving vernal pools? Because they're habitats. This is a habitat.
Well, I think the issue.
That's the point I was making, that
Right.
it does matter,
But the issue.
whether it's a vernal pool or not, on this level.
But again, what I'm trying to say is whether you believe what Sebago Technic says or not, they have determined that there was not a vernal pool there. Now, I agree with you that wetlands have habitat value. In the state's regulatory scheme, they have set up levels of importance and allow certain things to be done depending upon the nature of that wetland. So in this case, you've got the right to fill 4,300 square feet without a permit. To do anything beyond that would require a permit. That permit has to come from the state, not from us. So they would have to go through the state's regulatory process. We could not fill in the Garceland Bog. There's simply no way that could be done. So Councilor Bouchard is protected in his backyard. So it depends on the nature of the wetland, whether you can do something or not. Quite honestly, in a lot of places, if you could not fill wetland, you could not develop at all. Because there might be one small patch of wetland.
And thank you, Ed, for that information. I wanted to follow up, if I may, with what Councilor Bouchard said, the point he was making, and I would add to that this body is not former planning directors. That isn't our task. There may be people that have done different things, but that isn't what we're doing in this body. We're not the planning board. We're not planners. We're not operating in a vacuum, looking at numbers and maps and saying, what do we feel in this cold environment would be the best direction for the city as an entity. We're looking at individual people that we represent, and our job is to represent them and be their voices, not to take a planning director's point of view, because the job of a planning director or a planning board member is completely different than what this body is charged with doing. And I think it's important for the council to recognize that our job is different. We're not the planning board. We have a different set of rules, and we operate with a different focus. And we're not the planning director, and some of us may have been planning directors, or engineers, or architects, or civil engineers, or designers. It doesn't matter, because that's not what we're doing here. We're representing the people that we were elected to represent, and when their voices say no, that goes beyond any other little detail that sometimes we might consider. In this case, it's a cut and dry situation where the people in the neighborhood don't want this, and for good reason. We're being asked to change the zoning contractually or conditionally for that property into something that it isn't allowed to do when all the neighbors don't want it. Pettingill School, we were asked to put a park in. It was allowed in the zoning. The residents came out in droves to support it. The question was, do we want houses or do we want a park? There was no question of changing the zoning to allow the park. And even if we were asked to change the zoning, if all the residents came out and mobilized pro-park, I would have voted the same way. I would have voted for the park because that's what they wanted. But in that case, it was a controversial issue, and there wasn't even a zoning change involved. What we're doing here is beyond that. We're being asked to change the rules, to put in something that none of the residents, none of the abutters want. And as a representative of those residents and abutters, there's no way I'm supporting this. That's how it's been from day one. It's the voice of the people I represent, and hopefully the other councilors will consider that when they make their individual choices.
Council Beam?
I understand the need for senior housing. I know we really desperately need it in this city. And as a senior myself on the council and someone who's thinking about downsizing, I understand the issue that we're going to need senior housing. But I don't think this is the way our city should be going to get senior housing. I would put this as a priority for the city of Lewiston. And in order to progress, we have to be looking for and encouraging senior housing. This isn't the place to do it. We have residents who sometimes grew up in this area and bought their parents' houses or stayed in their parents' houses and are living there under the current zoning system. We may even have, I'm not going to insult any, well, it's not insulting to be a senior citizen, is it? We may even have senior citizens living in that area who, for whom this would be a big issue. And when all of these people moved to that area or stayed there in their parents' homes, they did so under a certain zone. And I think to change that zone is not the right way to get senior housing. My other concern is that I don't think it would be an appropriate area for the seniors. Just imagine this whole area is surrounded by houses, and everybody or most people have, you know, their part of the backyard delineated by fences, and what's going to happen is that the seniors will be trapped in a chain link fence, well, not chain, but a fenced area, and there's probably not that much room for parking once you have parking spots, because actually these seniors will be a lot younger than I, and I'm still driving, and 55-year-olds and over still drive. So we're going to have a lot of seniors in that senior residential facility who are driving, who need parking spots. And what are they going to do when they walk out of their house or their development? They're going to just walk out into a parking lot, most likely, because it's not a big area. I walked all around it and I wasn't even tired. And it was winter and it was cold. And it's not big. And to put this large of a unit in that area is not only going to be hard on the residents who are there and who counted on the city to honor the zoning, but it's going to be hard for the residents who move into that housing complex. We just heard we're not going to have busing. There aren't too many places people can walk to if they're living there. I'm not sure how far away Shaw's is, but that might be the first store that I can think of that they could walk to. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, but I think it's like 2 miles distant before they can get to a bus stop.
I don't have the exact mileage, but it's a very lengthy distance between bus stops.
And some of these are senior citizens again, but if they don't drive, they might find it difficult to walk to a bus stop to get anywhere. We heard about special bus services. I don't think that, we don't even know if this is going to be available. We don't know how it's going to work. We don't know whether these people will be able to afford it. We don't know anything about that. As a matter of fact, we don't know a heck of a lot about this whole project. We really don't know what it's going to look like. I asked the very first time, give us a little diagram or something of what it's going to look like. We don't know that still. Well, we've been told we don't have a vernal pool. I'm still curious about that, and I may need to get to the bottom of it, like we have to talk one-on-one here, because first you decide it's not a vernal pool, and then it doesn't matter what date you do the testing. How did you decide it wasn't a vernal pool if you hadn't done testing yet? So, unless I'm not understanding you at all, that's what I'm hearing you say. And that doesn't make any sense. So the other thing that I don't know is when the testing was done. You don't have a date.
There's no vernal pool.
There's no vernal pool. Who decided that and when?
A scientist said that.
When?
In May. I don't have the date he was on site, but
Okay,
in
I
May.
understand what you're saying now. Okay, so it doesn't matter.
And because there's no vernal pool, you don't have to worry about that 2-week window to count fairy shrimp and salamanders and whatnot.
So the reason there's a window is because that's when you're going to find those things.
Correct.
And if you go to there and test it before the window, you're not going to find them, and you're going to say there's no vernal pool, so we can test
No,
anytime
the
we
testing
want.
isn't a function of the vernal pool.
Let me just read this.
I'm sorry, this is...
I hate to interject, well, I do want to interject here because vernal pools seem to be something we're hung up on. I pulled the report from Sebago, which is actually in the council pack, and it's one small paragraph. It says, a vernal pool survey was performed on this project site in May 2017 by somebody who works for Sebago Technis. This survey conforms to the standards and methods outlined in Chapter 335, Section 9 of the Natural Resources Protection Act of Maine, Department of Environmental Protection. No vernal pools were identified on this site. That means the survey was done according to the standards established by the state. The date is somewhat beside the point because that statute that's referenced would say, here's when you have to do it. They abided by it. Does that put the issue to bed?
Do we know when the window is? What is the window? What is the 2-week window?
I don't know, but I'm sure the statute that's referenced here specifies it, and it says it abided by it. I don't know the date. It's not what I do. The people who live in this world, that's exactly what they do. They met the standard established by the state according to the documentation submitted.
I'm just looking for the puzzle pieces to the puzzle here. That's it. Thank you.
The date varies depending on the spring we have. If we have a late spring like we did this year, that 2-week window is later. Some years it's early April. But it's typically sometime mid to late April, typically. Sometimes as late as early May, depending on the snow cover.
I do know there.
And that's why I mentioned the peepers. When the snow starts going and you hear in those certain areas tree fogs, that's usually the 2-week window. That's usually the 2-week window. But the thing to remember is you're looking at rezoning the property. And I'm not advocating one way or the other. That's your job. If you rezone it, the questions that you're raising, those are the questions that the planning board wrestles with and the staff wrestles with on a very regular basis. And the planning board does a great job. They put a lot of effort in their projects. So any project that we're going to approve, if we get to a project and it hasn't been designed, all those details will be dealt with. The cost associated with doing a project of this nature is significant because there's so much engineering that needs to be done on so many levels.
Yes, Council Cooley.
So I have a question for you, Gil. We've talked a little bit about the current zoning and the proposed rezoning. And it's, I guess, been implied that only single-family homes are allowed in under the current zoning. And I checked in with Ed earlier today, and that actually, my understanding is that that's actually not true, that the land, as it is now, that is owned by the Willettes, that is split between the two zones, correct? Because he owns 2 parcels in one zone and one in a different zone. That's the one we're looking to rezone.
Yep, the big red area.
That he could build a church of this same size on that land right now.
Correct.
And it wouldn't require any rezoning on the part of this council.
Correct. He would need planning board approval. We would still be looking at traffic, and there'd be a lot more traffic generated by a church. We'd be looking at wetlands. We'd be looking at all those findings that have to be looked at.
So the statement that only single-family homes could be built on this land and that, you know, somehow this rezoning is disrupting, I mean, I understand that it's disrupting that assumption, but that is an assumption. That actually isn't factual.
That's correct. You could do a fire station, you could do a school, you could do a church. There are a number of things that you can do. The NCA is essentially a single-family neighborhood, but there are other uses that you can put the property to today as a matter of right. You could also do what we call community living arrangements, the Murphy homes, if you will. I think Mr. Willett mentioned that, where you could potentially have as many as 8 individuals living in a home, unrelated, you know, requiring 24/7 care. And those are great homes. They don't create any issues. They're treated as single-family homes. You could also do a very small single-family subdivision as well.
Council Beam.
I really hadn't finished saying what I wanted to say. I started with, no, it wasn't yours. No, that's okay. I'll finish. I started by saying I understand the need for housing, and I'm going, as long as I'm on this board, that's going to be a priority, and I think that's what the city needs to do, is to look for areas where we could have housing that would be good for everybody, including the people who are going to live in that district. But I have to agree with Councilor Bouchard that I just can't see changing the zone, and I can't see disrupting this neighborhood, because I don't think that the good that we're going to get from this housing is going to warrant or justify destroying a neighborhood. And I don't think that's the way to go. And my first step is going to say no to the zoning, and then have to say no, of course, to the housing if the zoning passes, but it's just not the thing to do. It's not the right way to go. Now I'm done.
Else? Hearing none? We'll go to the public. Okay? Because I know you're all waiting. Please be two things, okay? One is, we're going to have some different opinions. Let's all be respectful. And let's not have any outbreaks of whatever, okay? This is not going to be decided tonight, but you are here, and now is the time to say what you want to say, because you're going to have a month to digest it in this council.
Is Katie Coleman here tonight? Okay, do you want to record?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Hang on just a second. Okay, yeah, he got you. He beat you. Why don't you just have the
can
seat
stay
there,
there.
though?
Hi, my name's Louis Willett. I'm the one that's proposing conditional rezoning. You guys had some issues before. I addressed all of them. As far as this wetlands, okay, this isn't a real wetlands, and I can get Sebago Techniques to come here and tell you this. And this is why there's a wet spot in the low part of the neighborhood. Where does water go? Lowest part of the neighborhood. This part of the neighborhood where it's low like that, this dirt was dug out to backfill some of these houses. And this is all through Sebago Techniques, okay? So if there is no wetlands, I can get a certificate from the DEP to show you that. But it costs more money to do that, okay? If I can just fill it in without getting a permit, why would I incur the expense to all the other ones I've already incurred? The traffic survey you guys have heard, I put 55 and older down there. As far as the wet spot that's affecting East Avenue, okay, there's a culvert that goes from the bottom of my property that used to feed to a manhole, okay? I went there this winter, dug it up, replaced the pipe that's on my property. The rest of the pipe is on Leo Bennett's property, okay? I hired Roto-Rooter. They sent the camera down there. When the city rebuilt East Avenue, they discontinued that culvert pipe to the manhole. That's why it doesn't flow out there no more. That's why it's wet there. Okay? There's no water there right now. It doesn't hold water. Okay? This council is, you're looking for the local people right here. Diane, great. I think you were great taking care of your mom when she was sick, and that was awesome. But not everybody can do that, and not all parents want to live with their kids. So if you couldn't have taken care of your mother, where would you want her to live? Council Beam, you said this isn't a good place. Where would be a good place?
I didn't say it isn't a good place. I think it doesn't appear that it would be comfortable for senior citizens.
So where would be comfortable?
As
Give me an
I said,
example.
that's something we have to work on. We need new housing in this city, and that's what I am committed to working on. It's going to be a high priority for me, and other services for senior citizens too that I've become aware of don't exist that need to exist, and that all is going to be a priority as long as I'm here on the council.
And I've talked to people who live downtown in the senior housing, because that seems to be where everybody wants to put the seniors, downtown. Well, there's some beat-up buildings, we'll tear them down, we'll put you down there. Well, all the people that live on the Oak Street project, they don't let people outside. They're scared. This is a good neighborhood for seniors. This is a good spot. Your people can walk out, could have gardens, flowers, trees. This is what's there. There is no live, there's no more animals in there than there is anywhere else in town, okay? All of these stories are made up. It's just, the wetlands survey proves this stuff. I'm not sure why you guys are beating the facts to death. They're facts, okay? Opinions are fine, but these are facts. And like Council, I'm sorry.
Me?
Yes, no, you, thank you. I lost my train of thought now. I can build other stuff there. I can put a mosque down there. I could put Murphy Homes, and actually I could put 24 distressed kids in that area. What's better for the neighborhood? Seniors or 24 distressed kids? A mosque? What is best? And don't be disillusioned. This property will be developed. If I can't do what's best for this city, which is senior housing, I will put what you let me put there, which will make me more money. I didn't do this for money. I did this because all of these people either want to go there or have someone that does. How many people are for this project are in this room? Last time you said I had nobody here. I bring people. You guys are all, you have a few neighbors that don't want the project, and that's fine. They may not like what goes there instead. And that's why you guys should really think about this, the neighbors, okay? Because it will be developed. I am going to cut the trees. I am going to fill in the wetlands. This is all going to happen. You know, it's not, I don't need you guys' permission for this. What's best for this city? A church, a mosque, or senior housing? You want distressed seniors over there? Yeah, I'm sorry, distressed teenagers there in Murphy homes? What's best for the neighborhood? It's going to happen. Something's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Kent Lawrence, and I live at 29 Moody Street. So Mr. Ouellette, once again, has intimidated the council and the neighborhood with what he just said about what he can build there. He can put whatever he wants on that property right now, either or he can get his 55 plus. He just said it. He intimidated us. He's being a bully. We're coming here.
We're not going to get into. We're not getting into name calling. Okay.
I'm just
If we're going to do that, you're going to be ruled out of order.
So I'm going to go by the Lewiston Comprehensive Plan. And this is the city of trees. So the planning board and the council allowing the loss of more green space in the trees, large trees in this area, that. The comprehensive plan, page 43, says that nearly 1/3 of the downtown Lewiston and about 150 acres is underutilized land potentially available for development and redevelopment. But he's got a 2-acre lot he wants to take away of trees from the city, green space. Lewiston Comprehensive Plan, page 206, keep it green, preserve tree canopy. Not going to happen here. The Lewiston Comprehensive Plan, page 53, says while there are numerous single-family homes, yes, there are options for very few elderly people living in smaller condominium units. But the senior housing is age 65, not 55. As far as the planning board goes down the road, I know this is not quite talking about, it's a little about the development. The wetlands runoff we were talking about a little bit a while ago. I believe it was a bleachery that was there at one time many, many years ago. There was something there. My wife's ex used to work there. And I think he's going to find there's ground contamination he's going to end up dealing with. So he might want to be considering the EPA before he starts digging. So my final thing is, once again, I've been here before. I don't want this in my neighborhood. I don't want the OR. We asked the planning board, we've asked the city council before. And too many neighbors have come here before and have spoke on behalf of this neighborhood and said, no, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, just step up to the mic. He's first, you're second, okay?
Thank you. Steve Huzzy, a taxpayer in the city of Lewiston. I'd first like to applaud this group of individuals for dealing with a very difficult issue. I particularly admire your ingenuity in trying to figure out a way to deal with the kids in the pool and keeping an open mind for the difficult process budgeting is. But I think as you all sit up there saying you represent people in the city of Lewiston, you do. You represent us as taxpayers. And I would much rather have a project that generates a significant amount of income on a piece of property as opposed to a church or another non-paying other than rain tax property. So I think it's very important to be considering all the people in the city of Lewiston and recognizing the people who live in the area at the same time, saying what is best for our city of Lewiston. Thank you.
Steve, could you just give your address, please? This has got to go on.
My address, I own a property on 17 New Begin Avenue, Lewiston, Maine. I live in Wales, Maine also.
My name is Diane DeRocha, and good evening, Mayor McDonald and councilors. Can you hear me? What else can I say to all of you which I haven't or someone else hasn't already said? Our words and feelings seem to have fallen on deaf ears to the planning board and some of the councilors. We've mentioned the safety issues, the traffic issues, the wetlands impact. The bright lighting shining into our homes, privacy issues, buffers, a detailed site plan, and decreased property values. A neighbor spoke to me that he spoke to a realtor and what happened? And property values will go down with this type of building in our backyard. Traffic issues, 55 plus, some of these proposed residents most likely still work, which will increase traffic with school buses and other vehicles leaving at the same time, usually 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, especially after the new school is built. Also would like to share some safety issues which were shared with me when I was going around the neighborhoods passing around the petition. One car was broken into right across from me on Moody Street near the proposed project. Police were called. Another car was broken into on Charles Street. $700 worth of items were stolen. Police report was filed. 2 apartment buildings near Orange Street and East Avenue had some drug raids involving cocaine and marijuana. There was a police report made. 3 young teenagers were looking into people's homes on Charles Street, checking to see if they were home. A neighbor called the police. Number 5, a house on Tampa Street had a break-in. Police report was filed. 6, on the corner of Green Street and East Avenue, there was a shooting a few months ago. 7, about 2 months ago, a high school student got hit by a car, corner of East Avenue and Webster Street. Does that sound safe to you? What I'd like to ask is, where is this detailed map showing us exactly where the building, the parking spaces, how many parking spaces they're going to be, green space, entrances, and exits? How high is this building going to be? How wide is it going to be? It seems to keep changing. Instead of the planning board showing us instead, the planning board is showing us an outdated map of the area. Most of the people no longer live there or have died. If it gets rezoned and he builds the building, then after he finds out he can't get enough residents, 55 plus, to live there, can he have other people rent there? If after a few years he decides to sell the building, will the person purchasing it have to follow the same rules of 55 plus, or can that person rent to whomever? It was mentioned in a comment after a few years, if he decides to sell it and Bates College purchase it, then it turns into student housing. Wait a minute. Student housing. Okay, you're already dealing with problems around Bates College with parties and neighbor complaints. Then we will have to deal with that too. Poof, there goes your $80,000 of revenue, since Bates College does not pay any property taxes. So your biggest argument in the revenue being brought to the city, but you could all lose that. What happens after it's built and he wants tax credits and it becomes subsidized housing? That's something to think about. Tom Dow, a neighbor of mine, commented, "Please take in consideration before cutting down all these trees that they produce a rich oxygen environment. I have COPD, a lung disease, which if this occurs will be detrimental to my health. I recently found out that another one of my neighbors also suffers from COPD. Also, the trees act as a sound barrier between Moody Street, East Avenue, Boston Avenue, and Webster Street. There are animals that make their home in that small forest. There's a family of cardinals and blue jays that come each year to nest here. We also have mallard ducks who come to nest every year in the wetlands. If you allow this rezoning, these animals will lose their nesting grounds. I sit on my deck and I enjoy watching Mother Nature all around me, and I don't want to see it all go away." You're talking about the wetlands. I'd like to mention something there. I spoke to Dawn from EPA, and she said the testing has to be done between mid-April to the end of April. If it's done any time after that, it's very hard to determine if there is a vernal pool there or not. This is something she did tell me. So you can take that in consideration. As you can see, I have 52 more names of residents from nearby wards who are also against this rezoning and project. Here are some comments that they asked me to share with you since they were unable to attend the meeting. Beth Elquist, 19 Charles Street, Ward 5, commented, "It is not just the abutting residents who are affected. It will affect us all in one way or another. I don't like the impact on the environment and the trees being destroyed. We need green space. I'm against it, and I hope that my councilor votes no." Daniel Deshane, 238 Webster Street, Ward 5, commented, "I can't believe how long this process has been going on, and it seems like there's no more information on the project than when it started. It is my understanding that no detailed site plan has been presented. So it seems as though, without a plan, the council cannot make an informed decision on this project. I am against it for many reasons. I hope my council votes no on this project." I'd like to read an email that he sent Council Ward 5, Kristen. Is it all right? Okay, thank you.
I was actually going to get to that in my statement, but...
Okay. Dear Kristen, I am writing to express my concern to the potential construction of a multifamily 37-unit housing project on Webster Street. I don't think that the rezoning of property on Webster Street is the best interest of the neighborhood. It is unfortunate that Louis Willette's vision for the property is so out of character for such a beautiful oasis of green space. He is positioned to take away forever change the beauty and solitude that the neighbors have enjoyed for many years. It has been said and proposed by officials that Lewiston needs more housing for its aging population. Yes, that may be true. But at what cost to existing property owners? Is it right to build such a density of housing on that parcel of land? To negate any reasonable buffer to the existing neighbors. Safety is a growing concern on our roads. Distracted driving and speeding are factors that make Webster Street a dangerous road. Why would safety-conscious officials want to add more traffic? Vehicles entering and exiting the proposed development, and to make matters worse, so close to a major intersection. I live at 238 Webster Street. My home is opposite of Moody Street. The entrance to the project would be about 200 feet away. I, too, have an interest in not having Louis Willette build on Webster Street. Why make matters worse? What about the quality of life for the existing neighbors? Hang on. Mike Reed commented, he's using 55 plus so he can get through the door. Then once it's built, he will do whatever he wants. Then here comes subsidized housing. I've seen this many times with other projects. Today, our senior citizens can't afford $1,000 and $2,000 rents. Scott Reed, 244 Webster Street, Ward 5, commented he wasn't against adding senior housing in Lewiston or the fact that he needs more, that we need more housing. But the problem is the location. This is not an appropriate location for this type of project. So if this developer is really interested in adding senior housing, why not look to other areas in the city where it would be more appropriate? I hope my counselor votes no. A resident from Ward 5 commented, what percentage of the abutting properties and other neighborhoods have to be against it for the whole council to say no? If someone tried to put this in my backyard, they would have a big fight too. No, no, no. I hope my counselor votes no. One resident commented, an election is coming up, so they better be considering their vote. They are supposed to be representing us, not voting for personal reasons. I'm against it, so I hope my counselor in Ward 5 votes no. Richard Tremblay, 27 Boston Avenue, Ward 7, commented, I wasn't aware of this project. I enjoy seeing and hearing the birds singing. I enjoy seeing the nature around me, and I don't want to see it disrupted. I'm against this project, and I feel this is a residential area and should remain that way. I don't want to see high-rise buildings in my neighborhood. It's not the right area for this type of project. Please vote no and don't disrupt all the beauty in our neighborhood. Leslie Jean, 10 Charles Street, Ward 5, commented, I hope that this doesn't pass and the councilors vote it down. I'm against it. It's not the right area, and I don't want the wetlands or nature be disrupted. One resident in Ward 7 commented, it's not the appropriate place for this type of project. Traffic will be increased tremendously. There was an accident on the corner of Moody Street and Boston Avenue a while back when someone went through a stop sign. At the building where he owns on the corner of Boston Avenue and East Avenue is never plowed good. He just piles the snow up on the side of the road, blocking the view and access of drivers trying to enter and exit off of Boston Avenue. After a big snowstorm, a neighbor had to plow one of his tenants out so they could go get his medications. The plowing was not done till mid-afternoon. Will these proposed residents be able to count on him to plow them out early enough so they will be able to go to work, etc.? Or will they be stuck in their apartments and not be able to get out? I don't like hearing that the trees will be destroyed. I enjoy hearing the birds and seeing the nature around me. I'm completely against this. Please vote no. I like my neighborhood the way it is. Mike Wright, 135 Oak Street, Ward, either 1 or 3, because it runs across, commented, "It's not the right location for such a large building. This is a residential neighborhood and not downtown." Pedro Rogers, 195 Webster Street, Ward 7, commented, "I'm against this. I don't want it. I enjoy the peace and quiet and nature, so why ruin it?" Colette Martin, 17 Moody Street, Ward 7, commented she was against it. Don Simpson, 2 Charles Street, Ward 5, commented, "They try to take down the trees behind my house and they will have a fight on their hands. Not an appropriate place for that building. They should not fill in the wetlands even partially or cut down any of the trees. I like nature. I'm against it. I hope my councilor votes no." One resident told me this would mean that anyone in a residential area that is already zoned to avoid multifamily development is in jeopardy of having their backyards transformed at the will of the politicians. Another resident commented, "It's like opening up a Pandora box and not being able to close it again." Another resident told me the property values and quality of life will be negatively affected. One resident commented, "I can't believe it wasn't a dead issue and certain councilors sent it back to the planning board. Nobody wants it, including myself, so what part of no don't they understand? No means no." One person who works for an engineering firm commented, "Rezoning to shoehorn 37 units into a 2-acre plot is a very bad idea, in my opinion. If he builds a 3-story building, that would also open up a big can of worms, building code-wise." He also said the location is not good for that density. He couldn't see how it's even possible that the proposed project would fit there with all the needed requirements. How on earth do you fit 37 units, and now I understand it's going to be 40 units, on 2 acres while meeting open space and parking requirements? 3 stories will also require elevated, since this is going to be the elderly, among other expensive things, if it is meant to be really 55 plus. Kathy Dance Morris commented, "I would be very upset if this happened in my neighborhood. Property values will go down." Heather Ray Turner commented, "As a Webster Street resident, I'm very disappointed with the planning board's blatant bullying and attempted manipulation of the council." Sherry Cloutier commented, "I'm in Ward 6, and I'm asking my councilor, Jolene Beam, to vote no, so I can trust in our city to protect my land rights. Allowing for this to happen sets a bad precedent. I want to see development in our city too. I hope the city council looks at the bigger picture. However, it is the council's responsibility to protect zoning and open up exceptions only when warranted. In this case, all the neighbors will be negatively impacted. They should heavily weigh into their decision. I would hope if this were my neighborhood, my councilor and the whole council would protect my property. I feel sad for the people that could lose green space adjacent to their backyard to make way for a larger building and parking. If the space is not zoned for that type of housing, it's sad that the planning board is pushing for this here. Can it be put somewhere else? Many of us live in the residential areas. Imagine your neighbor selling their zone and the city allowing a developer to raise it and build a large apartment building. Seems like a bad precedent. Arthur Langley commented, knowing the law and the Lewiston zoning bylaw, Why did the developer not purchase or option land that was already legal for this proposed development? Unless the intent was to ignore circumvent the existing law. I'm probably saying that word wrong. Circumvent. Okay, I'm saying it right? Okay. If it were allowed to legally be built, I bet it would operate for 1 or 2 years. Before they figured out to be economically unviable and be sold to the college. There goes the tax revenues for the city. It would turn into student housing and staff housing. How many acres are there in Lewiston? How many acres are already zoned? Business friendly. For years, there has been a lot of commercial business friendly land for sale in Lewiston, some for too many reasons. A lot of the senior citizens I spoke with, which are on the petition that I submitted to you, commented it's the wrong place to have this. I would not live there. Tina Burrill on 50 Warren Avenue commented, I'd never live there and I'm over 55. So I ask you, will you be voting for your constituents' desires or will you be voting for personal reasons? Thank you for listening. I urge you as well as your constituents to vote no. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak?
Hi, my name is Amy Poland. I own the property at 12 Boston Avenue, and basically everything that I was going to say has already been said. But 12 Boston Avenue directly abuts the piece of property, and what's difficult for me is to look at that map and know that that's really not representative of what the actual site looks like. If this project goes through and the building is built, it literally will have line of sight into my home. And that really losing the character. So for the last probably week, I have been reading Lewiston zoning codes. I have been reading the comprehensive plan because we were lucky in January to have this brought up at the same time as the comprehensive plan. So it was very easy to say, we need senior housing, so we need to move this back to the planning board to talk about senior housing. And tonight, another issue on the agenda is about the expanding the moratorium on lodging housing and being able to look at that. And one of the reasons for doing that is to maintain residential character. Well, I'm asking you that this rezoning does not maintain the residential character of our neighborhood, and a large part of the comprehensive plan also talks about neighborhoods such as ours maintaining residential character. And so I hope that you will please oppose the rezoning and maintain the residential character for our neighborhood. Thanks.
Anyone else wish to speak?
I live at 157 East Avenue, so this is all going to be beside my home and behind it, and it's quiet and peaceful, and my children play there, and this construction is going to be disruptive, and then all the traffic that's going to be going on, and it's going to totally take away any privacy from my home and all my neighbors around me, and I think that's devastating because when I bought my home, I had no idea about any of this, and it's really troubling to me. I understand the need for senior housing, but I feel like there are plenty of other places that there could be senior houses. This is like a massive, big building that's just going to be towering over all of my neighbors' houses. So I hope that everyone looks into their heart and really thinks about this, because I think this is wrong for my neighborhood and my neighbors and my children. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to rebuttal some of the things that were said. As far as appraisals go for houses, I hired an appraiser that went around the neighborhood, and property value will not go down. It's a tired neighborhood, and if anything, this will bring the property value up. As far as green space, I don't see anybody complaining about all the trees they cut for the new school or the ballpark they're going to be putting across the street from you guys' house. And just so you know, I hired Sebago Techniques in March. They waited till it was time to do the vernal pool delineation. That's why the survey the test results came out in May. I understand you guys need to vote for your constituents, and that's fine. But I'm just telling you what the truth is. Took away everything, but I don't want it there. Everything else has been rebutted. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm Bruce Damon. I'm the chairman of the Planning Board. When Mr. Willett brought this project forward, it met with some resistance at the Planning Board initially, and the contract rezoning issues that he has agreed to should, in my opinion, and I've been on the Planning Board now over 10 years, the conditions that are being placed on this will prevent most of the scenarios that have been thrown out there as pure speculation. With it being designated a 55-plus facility, it's not going to become student housing unless Bates all of a sudden ends up having a senior college, which I don't see happening. Even if it was sold to a different developer, those same conditions will apply. If they tried to change it, there would be public hearings because any change of use would come back to the Planning Board, and it would eventually come back to the council. So this is not something that is going to be bounced around in a couple of years and somebody say, well, he built it, now he's going to move on. Mr. Willett is not asking for any type of TIF. He's not asking for assistance from Maine State Housing. He's not proposing that any of this become any type of subsidized housing. This is a market rate development by a private developer on his land. He could go out there tomorrow, if he so choose, and cut every tree right up to the property line. Nobody would be able to stop him, and there would be no consequences other than the fact that the trees would be gone. He can do that by right. That could happen today. He could put several buildings in there. Put a small subdivision in there. As he said, he could put some somewhat assisted living for troubled youth in there. He could do that today. That's one of the allowed uses. He could put a mosque in there. And it would have to come before the Planning Board. One of the reasons why there is no, per se, any plan yet is because he doesn't have permission to be able to develop that land in his vision. No one would go the extent and the expense of trying to do the full-blown plan at this juncture while it still remains an open question as to whether or not what he proposes would be allowed to be built. He's invested more money and has employed more professionals at this stage of a proposal than almost any other development I've seen in almost 10 years on the Planning Board. We don't ask for wetland studies. That's not part of what happens at this stage of a proposal. Yes, he owns the land. It is his land. It's his trees. Had Mrs. Bazinet decided that she wanted to maintain this as a green space, before she sold it to him, she could have placed restrictions on the property. She didn't. So now that he owns it, he has rights. He has property rights too. And he's asking for a zoning change which will allow him to provide something for the city and for the residents that has been clearly identified in the comprehensive plan. 3 weeks ago, when we all sat down and talked about how we were going to implement the comp plan, one of the things that has to happen is we have to embrace it. We have to decide whether or not the time, the effort, and the expense that was advanced to actually develop that plan, and I know there's several of the councilors that were actively involved in that, and staff was deeply involved in it, as was many members of the Planning Board. We felt we created a document that does allow for the city to move forward in an organized manner. We don't take our job on a planning board lightly, but we have rules. We have laws, and there are ordinances that determine how we make decisions. And those decisions are sometimes, and as I have said many times as I open planning board meetings, sometimes we don't necessarily agree with what is being proposed. But we are responsible to live by what is written. The issue of the development or the determination of the vernal pool is clearly scripted by the state. And any developer, all developers, live by those rules. And that's why the professional engineers, the people like Sebago, they clearly make that statement that this is in total conformity with the rules as propagated by the Department of Environmental Protection. If they chose not to follow those rules, they would be sanctioned. And the DEP has done it to people that have blatantly ignored the findings. Louis hasn't done that. He has tried at every turn to try to follow the rules and live by how this is being regulated. There was an accusation at one of our planning board meetings that there was some sort of collusion between Mr. Willett and the planning board. And I will tell you, I was deeply insulted. We give our time, we give our expertise, and we care about the city. And I will tell you that any development that happens within the limits of the city of Lewiston, anything that goes on here, I consider to be in my backyard, because the whole city is a community. It's not just a little corner here and a little corner there. The planning board doesn't see it that way. So when you take this under advisement, the only thing I would ask of you is that you consider the fact that the planning board has done due diligence. We have reviewed this 3 times. We feel that the proposal that's been brought before you is appropriate. And bear in mind, the planning board doesn't invent projects. We don't decide where someone chooses to purchase land or make proposals to us. It would be great if we could say, you know, we're going to get a Family Dollar and we'd like to see it downtown, because Family Dollar is going to go out on Sabata Street. It doesn't help the downtown. Mr. Willett owns property on that corner. He doesn't own property in the downtown. And we need to be cognizant of the fact that the planning board only deals with the facts as presented to them, and we can't make those other types of decisions. And we do not operate in a vacuum. We look at all the facts. And myself, I try as much as I can appreciate how people get emotional. I try to put the emotion beside the facts and weigh it, fact for fact. And emotion is a difficult thing to ignore. But the fact is, this is a project that meets many of the goals of the comp plan going forward, and it does meet the requirements that we have determined at planning for this project to move forward. So I'd ask you to just, rather than just arbitrarily say this is a bad place, to remember that this is far from done. He has to bring back to us a lot more plans, and there will be a lot more discussion that goes on before a piece of ground is turned here. So if we are serious about investment in the city, economic development, improving our housing stock, and providing for admittedly an aging population, and I am well within that criteria. I'm way beyond the age of which I could go to Louis' apartments. Please, think this through from a rational perspective. The planning board has thought this through diligently, and our recommendation is that this should be approved.
Thank you.
My name is Bridget Witten. I live at 6 Boston Avenue. That property that Louis wants to develop abuts my property. And I understand that you need to develop what you own. And if you were going to develop, as you just pointed out, houses, I'd be all for that. I don't want a 3-story building that looks into my backyard and potentially into my daughter's bedroom. I have issues with that. And you can't tell me that no matter what you have for a barrier, that a building that tall, that's going to be above my home, they're not going to see into my residence. They are. You know, you bought the house behind your other building, you tore that down. When the lights are on at the high school, it lights up the whole back of my house, my upstairs, my yard. I don't even have to use lighting out back for my dogs. So now if you're tearing down more, and now you're going to have security lighting for your buildings, which you're going to have to for senior housing, I have no privacy now. If you were going to put houses back there, I would probably support you wholeheartedly, because it would not change the way my neighborhood looks. They would not be looking into my property. So it's not that I don't want you to develop. I don't want you to develop something that's going to be 45 or 44 or whatever, if I'm a little off, excuse me, that's going to look into my property. It's not about senior housing, and it's not about your comp plan, because I did read your comp plan. Your comp plan says you have 33% of downtown that isn't developed, that actually, I believe in there it says that should be looked at first for developing for senior housing rather than disrupting neighborhoods first. I did read your comp plan, 200-something pages. There are several places in there that say, let's develop what is already not being used, which is 33%, before we start destroying neighborhoods. If you want to put a development back there of houses, I will support you 100%. You want to put a 3-story building that's going to look into my backyard, take away my privacy, potentially the privacy of my daughter in her bedroom? I have a huge, huge problem with that. I know supposedly there was no vernal pool. I know for a fact before you bought it, children played back there, caught salamanders. They live in vernal pools. April, I heard the peepers. I sent you an email about it. Unfortunately, it rained every day, Mike. I could not go out there with my phone and record the peepers. I wish I had. So, you know, I know Sebago is a reputable company, but they don't work for me. They work for you. You know? I don't know when they did their actual study, but I know I heard the peepers. Other people in the neighborhood have. So that's questionable for me. But like I said, you want to put houses back there? I'm all for it. You want a 3-story building? I can't support it. It's just how I feel. I know that some of you in the council have family members that need senior housing. Doesn't mean that that's where your family would be. And if you can't make a decision based on what is right for everybody and for that neighborhood because you have a personal stake, potentially, you need to recuse yourself. Thank you.
Oh, 135 Bartlett Street, Lewiston. This is the first I've heard of this housing project. I wish to give the residents that are in opposition a key to the whole situation. A few years ago, St. Laurent had a fire and part of Pierce Street and Bartlett Street burnt down. Well, she was going to put up a 4 to 5-story building in the middle of Bartlett Street and Pierce Street. And we started a people's initiative. This is something that is a process that the residents of Lewiston, Maine are given to collect a number of signatures to override the city council's decision. What you have to do is collect 1,000 signatures within a certain period, and it will appear on the ballot for the whole town to vote on. So I would look into that option if you don't get the the outcome you're looking for. With the St. Laurent project she came down. She came down with the size of the stories of the buildings. She enlarged the apartments, which cut the number of residencies in the area. And then that off-street parking that she wanted, she bought property, which got the traffic, got the parking on secured land for winter so they didn't get towed off. So I would look into the People's Initiative. It's not easy. I tried starting a few of them. It's not easy collecting 1,000 signatures, but it looks like your organization could do it. I would also get in touch with Stan and Doris Pelletier. They were a great aid in collecting signatures to stop the first attempt on the passage of the St. Laurent project. Thank you for your time.
Would anybody else like to speak?
One more time. If the neighbors are really that interested in this land, I'll sell it to them for $150,000. Nothing will happen to it. Opportunity. There you go.
All right.
Wow, there's a whole bunch of that about the property, right? It's split it up. There's 20 houses around that property.
Is there anybody else? Yes.
Can I ask a question up there? This lady, before I say something. Is Amy Pullen here? Do you want to read it? No, I already spoke. Do you want me to read your email?
Here.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? It's kind of hot here tonight. It's temperature-wise and probably but this is an important issue to you. There's a lot of people. We don't usually have this many people. You've come down here. If you want to speak, step up the microphone. But once I close the public comment period, you're going to have to wait for about at least a month. Okay? So is there anybody else that wishes to speak at this time? Okay, hearing none, public session's closed. Back to the council. Yes, Councilor Lachance. I'll tell you what, we're going to go from you, we're going to go right across the way.
Okay, brief comment I wanted to make. Mr. Willett said that there are no wetlands, and Sebago Technique said there are no wetlands. Well, Sebago Technique said their conclusion was there is no vernal pool. They say in their report, total wetland area in that parcel is 10,155 square feet. That is per Sebago Technique's correspondence, and it's on their map labeled as total wetland area on property equals 10,155 square feet. Their conclusion was that there was no vernal pool. There is a wetland, and there is quite a bit of water, and there's quite a bit of activity with that little ecosystem in there. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Councilor Beam, did you wish to speak?
Just to say that you have, when you're faced with this kind of situation, I think you need to weigh the good versus the bad, and I can't see, and I think emotion does play a role in making decisions. I think if we don't have emotion when we're making decisions, then I think we're lost. I think that's very important. And but you can even be practical and cerebral if you want to, and write down the pros and the cons. And I think that putting a senior citizen housing apartment that's that big in that neighborhood is not the right thing to do for all the reasons that I said. There's no access for citizens, for the senior citizens, to buses, to shopping, and other conveniences, and it just destroys a neighborhood. And so I hope you keep that in mind when I'm talking to the council.
Councilor Cludier.
So, wow, talk about intimidation. First of all, I want to be crystal clear about one thing, that I think my comments from the last time this came before us were taken out of context. My mom moved here from Florida 2 years ago, and at that time we were looking for senior housing for her. That this does not create a personal issue for me. She has since been diagnosed with dementia and is living at Clover Healthcare in Auburn, so in a locked facility, which is not at all the facility that Mr. Willett is looking to build. So let's be crystal clear about that. Mr. Dan DeShane reached out to me. He's a member of my ward today, and I responded to him via email, and I kind of want to just go through my response to him via that email as sort of part of my statement. So, I served on the Comprehensive Planning Committee with Bruce spent about 3 years of my life on that comp plan, and was probably one of the folks that attended every single meeting, came to the planning board discussion of the comp plan, and I'm glad that somebody has read the 200 and something pages of it. That makes me pretty happy, given how much time I've spent on that plan. And I think that we can, we can kind of sit here and talk about pages in the comp plan that support sort of both sides of this argument. So, in this packet, there's an entire page of how this conforms to the comp plan. So, you can sort of take those arguments on either side. I appreciate that you took the time to go out and collect all of these signatures. I will say the problem that I have with this, though, is that this is not at all objective. It's very subjective. The way that this is worded here is obviously coming from somebody who's against the project. So my question would be how this project was actually presented to the people that you collected the signatures from. And that's always, I think, a question that people have when we're talking about petitions. Let's see. At the last meeting where we discussed this, neighbors came out, they expressed their concerns, they presented us with a list of those concerns. We sent it back to the planning board to have those concerns addressed, and every single one of them came back being addressed. The statement has been made that, senior housing should be built downtown, and it's very unclear to me why we should relegate a specific demographic population to one part of our city. I think that seniors, and again, this is expressed in the comp plan, take it or leave it. I was also part of a listening tour that went throughout the state of Maine to talk about senior housing that came to Central Maine Community College in Auburn, and where that same need was expressed by people in this community in Lewiston, Auburn, who wanted someplace where they could retire, where they weren't living downtown. Some people choose to live downtown, some people choose not to. And our seniors should have that choice in the same way that everybody else in this room does. We talk about the traffic study. Again, a study's been conducted, there's a bigger study will be conducted. The initial study shows that there's going to be minimal impact to traffic. We talk about Mr. Willett owns this land, so he can say who can use it and who can't use it. I feel like part of this argument is that, well, we've been using it all this time, and that's great, but now somebody else owns it, and they get to make the rules about how that land is going to be used by people. The argument's been made that this zoning is somehow that the zoning is going to affect the size of the building that he can build, and that's not true. Right now, he can build a building that size on that land. The planning and code enforcement guide just said that. Gil, can you just confirm that for me one more time? Yes. Thank you. So I guess I have issues with that argument. And then, in terms of, we're having this conversation about why we haven't been presented site plans, why we're not seeing, what this building is going to look like. Well, because that's not how the process works. Nobody else that comes before the planning board is asked to do those things. So we've already given him a list of things that we've asked him to do that is above and beyond what anybody else has been asked. He's come back with responses to all of those things, the same questions that neighbors asked a month ago, 6 weeks ago, whenever that was. All of those things have been addressed. And so I feel like, again, we're getting to that place, and I think Mr. Willett said it himself, that this is just about, I don't want it. So this list of concerns and issues was kind of created to build this argument around something that just isn't wanted. And so in terms of weighing the pros and weighing the cons, that turns out to be like one reason on a list of cons. So, I mean, I guess that's where I stand.
Councilor Bouchard.
Okay. Don't even know where to start. I will find a place. I'll circle back to it 3 times, too. Mr. Willett, thank you for investing in Lewiston. Thank you for wanting to build here. I do not believe you have any ill intentions. I don't believe you have any intention of selling this property to Bates College or anyone else. Or I don't think you have any ulterior motives. I think you're trying to do a good thing. And it may be a great spot for senior housing. You talked about facts. The fact is it's not zoned for what you want to do. That's a fact. If you want to build a mosque, you want to build an apartment, regular housing, I'm going to sit here and support you because I'm a strong believer in personal property rights, which are yours and for the people around you. You do not have buy-in from one single abutter to your property. That's very telling. You have no buy-in. I don't care what the reason is. I don't care if the vernal pools are addressed. I said at the last meeting, all of that was blowing smoke because the people weren't going to go for it no matter what the outcome of that study was. I think we wasted the planning board's time. I apologize to them for that. I voted against wasting your time. I mentioned that exact quote, wasting your time. Chairman Damon, you did great work. Thank you very much. All our advisory boards do great work, and we take their advice sometimes. They're not elected. They're not beholden to constituents. We are. It could end up that Mr. Willett sells the property and someone wants to change the use. And my question is council going to listen as well as we have so far when the people come say no? If the answers are going to listen as well as we have so far, then what's it matter? Why don't we pull all the restrictions off it? Because it doesn't matter. It's just going to get changed anyway. I hope if you want to build something that's zoned for, go ahead. I don't care what it is. I will support you. You mentioned that the only issue is I don't want it. I don't want it's good enough for me because it's their property rights as well. It's real easy when you live in another city to say this is a great idea. There's a reason you live in another city. It's because you don't want to live next to a 40-unit apartment building. Okay, I don't think they have any of those in Sabattis or Wales or out there. That's why you live there, not here. That's why these folks live here, not downtown or somewhere else or next to the Promenade Mall. It's not what they bought. So, I have to say, when I first read this in the packet, I said this last time, I was all for it. Kind of rolled my eyes a little when Mike came out back and said, hey, I got a constituent who doesn't like this. Like, okay, we got one constituent. That's great. And I came out here and the place was full. Every single abutter was either on a petition or standing here. I can't support that. I don't care how much we need senior housing. People in the neighborhood, you don't have buy-in from the people in the neighborhood. You need buy-in. You need buy-in as a community. You need buy-in from the neighborhood, especially the people who are most effective. And those people who touch that property are most effective. And we've heard from them. Every one of them's on this petition or sitting here tonight or both. Mr. Sewell, you made a great point about a referendum. If my fellow councilors want to send it there today, I'll roll the dice with the city of Lewiston, know that they'll support these people. I'll send it right now. If anyone wants to make that motion, I'll be happy to second it because I'm not afraid of the people of Lewiston. I know how they'll vote. I know when votes are made ideologically, like the St. Laurent vote, they get overturned by the people. I'm happy to send it that direction, but hopefully we don't have to go there. Thank you all for coming out, for or against. But I'm going to stand with the residents who abut that property who are 100% for the no.
Councilor Golden.
Thanks. Thank you everyone for coming out. I just think opportunities for this kind of project don't come along very often in Lewiston. I think the need for senior housing is growing every day. I think Mr. Willett has been willing to work with to address many of the needs that were brought up and seems willing to continue to work with folks throughout the process. So that's where I stand.
Councilor Lysen.
Well, I'm a little concerned about a lot of the speculation that's been going on, and I agree with Planning Board Chair Bruce Damon about that speculation. Obviously, the whole point of a conditional zoning is to impose conditions that would not normally be imposed on a rezoning. Also, I didn't like the tone and tenor of talk about how subsidized housing is a negative thing. I think there's a role for subsidized housing in the community. Also, the kind of negative connotation of building a mosque is something that's negative to begin with, just because I have a problem with that. Also, houses for troubled youth. I mean, these are our families. You know, these are part of our families. So, I mean, we've got to look at uses throughout the city and to see what's appropriate. You know, I mean, on the technical merits, I mean, I think we can deal with traffic, we can deal with wetlands, we can deal with vernal pools. I think we've talked too much about vernal pools. Obviously, there's been a determination that it's not one. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, removing a wetland and trees and stuff doesn't have a negative impact on the neighborhood. So the other concern I had was this personal reasons type stuff. I mean, we're up here on the council to kind of represent both our constituents as well as the city as a whole. And sometimes those are, you know, at loggerheads. I mean, we've got to look, as Councilor Golden said, at development opportunities. I think there's a great need for senior housing. We're the oldest state in the union. We're an oldest community. And if it wasn't for our new Mainers, we would be the oldest city on average. But, you know, so there's that need that's there. You know, being a professional planner, I understand what conditional zoning, and in fact, I wrote the early ordinance concerning conditional zoning, and that's really something that what the developer's willing to impose on themselves to make sure that they're dealing with the concerns of the neighbors. One of the problems I have with the development, and I think, you know, it's been brought up that you know, the developer couldn't tell what the building was going to look like, where it's going to be, where the parking was, because that would be too much money to do. I think that would have been something that would have been very helpful, you know, to deal with some of the visual impacts of the building, you know, the architecture, the placement of parking, how much is it going to impact the wetland, those types of things. So I think we could have demanded more. And remember, this is a rezoning. This isn't like the planning board says, this is the rules and regulations we've got to follow. It's really up to the city council to vote with respect to a rezoning. It's not a right that someone gets. That being said, we're going to be faced with the implementation of a comprehensive plan where we're going to be doing rezonings all over the city. That's the way things happen. That's a natural occurrence. We can't at any one time understand what our future needs are going to be. And right now, you know, there's a balance between, we're trying to strike the balance between, you know, a neighborhood, a development, a community need. That's tough. But right now we have, you know, we can say yes and no, and we can't be challenged. I mean, this isn't that we're ignoring rules and regulations. This is a request that really we have our control over. And, you know, I've again, like I said, I mentioned some of the you know, we have to rise above our personal, you know, reasons and look at it on how it's good for the community, how it affects the neighborhood. I certainly would, you know, this stance of hearing from the neighbors. Sometimes we've got to lead, sometimes we've got to follow, sometimes we've got to educate people. But, you know, this has been, I think, a difficult discussion. You know, I really appreciate people coming out and exercising their democratic rights to come and speak. And I think, Mr. Mayor, you've done a great job of allowing that to happen. So we've been able to hear from people about their issues. and hear from Mr. Willett, too, and on his opinions. And this is, one way or another, it's not an easy decision for any of us to make. So please understand that we're human beings as well. We've got, our emotions, but we're trying to hold those in check and make right decisions, for the community and for the neighborhood, too. I'm hearing you. We all live someplace, you know what I mean? And also, don't like some of the discussion about, the kind of the downtown, anti-downtown thing. I think we're all part of the same community and where we live. And I don't like an idea of segregating any type of peoples or demographics or incomes or whatever. I think we all ought to live together and build a community at the same time by doing that. So again, I'm not quite sure. I've been on the council a little over a year and a half, and this is probably the toughest decision I've seen or the toughest issue that we've had, even above the chickens, which were pretty big. So, anyway.
Mr. Mayor?
Can I?
Yes.
Want to start over from 7 again?
Yes.
Okay. Round 2.
And several other
This will be brief from me. Just responding to some points other councilors made. Mr. Willett may have, on paper, met the requirements or the requests of the City Council in that vote. I did not vote for that, sending the item back to the Planning Board. I was opposed to that. I felt it was a waste of time. Mr. Willett didn't meet the demands or the desires or wishes of the abutters. Building went from 37 to over 40 feet. Privacy was not addressed. It was made worse. Cutting down trees. Mr. Willett stated that he might just cut down all the trees, and it sounded spiteful to me, but that's just my interpretation of that. Property values are impacted. We've heard one way or another they're going to be impacted, and I'm not one to believe that they're going to increase by having an apartment complex. Mr. Willett doesn't get to make the rules because he owns the property. He does not make the rules. The City Council and the Code of Ordinances with staff, the votes that we make here make the rules. The rules say single-family zone. That's the rules. There are grandfathered properties in there that are allowed to remain, and it isn't up to anyone to just buy a piece of land and make the rules. You have to follow the rules. We're being asked to break the rules in a case where all the abutters are against it. If, as Mr. Bouchard said, Councilor Bouchard, if all the abutters thought this was a great idea, this would have been done months ago. It wouldn't have taken more than 5 minutes. That isn't the case. I don't want it. That's my opinion. Every opinion of every abutter I've heard said, I don't want it. My opinion of the merger, I don't want it. Why? Because I don't want it. I don't need to give anybody a reason or a list of legal technicalities or ordinances or financial numbers or anything. If that's what I don't want, that's my vote. You don't need to make a list of demands and meet these demands and satisfy someone as to why you don't want it. We've heard enough reasons as to why the abutters don't want this. Some of them we covered, some of them are technical, some of them are items that have been addressed. But to me, I ran for office to be the voice and your vote, and it's your city. That was why I ran. I'm not running again. I'm not doing this for my political legacy. The reason I'm here is to be your voice and to be your vote. Not for the city as a whole, although that's a part of it in some items. In this case, this is near and dear and close to home. That's what this is about. If I was in that neighborhood, I would be out there sitting with you. You can guarantee it. Because I don't want it. And in this case, my belief aligns with the people that I represent, and apparently other people in other wards who've signed and written letters. Opportunities like this will come along because it's in the comprehensive plan. This comprehensive plan is being beat to death in 2 months. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing because it's a useful document and we need to use it. But I don't see one thing in staff's recommendations that says how opposing this aligns with the comprehensive plan, because opposing this change aligns perfectly with the comprehensive plan. But I see nothing in the memo from staff saying anything about how that aligns with the comprehensive plan. We're given a document that has all the reasons to vote for it and excludes all the reasons that it shouldn't be passed. We've got to make a decision. That's what we've been handed here. Staff has an opinion. The city administrator recommends approval of the requested action. Thus is the content of the memo that we have that gives all the reasons about how it perfectly fits with the comprehensive plan, ignoring all the other parts of the plan that contradict the rezoning of this property. I find that troubling, because what we're being asked to do is break the rules for someone who bought a piece of property knowing exactly what he couldn't do with it. And we have a room full of abutters who don't want this. That is enough. That's all I need. That's the reason I'm going to oppose this, and I sincerely ask the council to consider opposing this, and I thank all of you for coming down.
Mr.
Yes.
Round three. I agree with Representative Lysen about these scare tactics that are being used tonight, and I don't like it. I don't like making it sound like other things would be a bad thing and picking out things in people, specific people who would make us feel as though it would be a bad thing for the neighborhood. And actually, it's intimidating. It's scare tactics, and I don't appreciate it. But I'm not going to be scared by that. I'm going to vote my conscience. And the comp plan supports both sides, as Representative Lachance. Thank you.
Okay.
It's getting late.
Is there anyone else that wants to speak?
No, I'm not done.
Oh, good. Oh, I let you finish.
I'm not done. Yeah, thank you. As Representative Lachance said, and when we're battling two separate rights, which is what we're doing now, we have to consider which right is correct. And I have to say, your rights stop when they start infringing on my rights. And you have to consider who's going, and that's why we have zoning laws. That's why we have councils. That's why we have government, is so that everybody's rights will be thought through. And I lost my thought because I heard somebody moaning. I'm sorry. But we have to think about, in this case, what the better of the two rights are at this moment. And that brings me to the next thing that I have to say. A vote against this particular senior housing does not mean a vote for sending the seniors anywhere else. It's just a vote to say this is not the right place. And of course seniors have the right to live wherever they want. And I would be the first to encourage senior housing all over the city, wherever it would be appropriate. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm making this vote, so that, we will send people certain places that we want to send them. That's scare tactics, and I don't like it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes,
I just want to say thank you for what you said about
Councilor Bouchard?
All right. Well, thank you, Jolene. And also from me, I agree with you. This is not a vote against senior housing everywhere. Mike, you mentioned the reasons you ran, same reasons I ran, to represent the people. We all have a political party up here, has nothing to do with city council. Maybe sometimes it shows, maybe sometimes it doesn't. It shouldn't. All the time. Sometimes it should. And I just want to say, as Jim said, this is one of the most trying issues we faced. This is a big issue. And I think because it's such a big issue, I actually want to thank, I'll recognize them now. There's 3 mayoral candidates here, Mark Kerr, Chuck Sewell, and Ron Poulin. They're all here. They're listening to this discussion. They're taking it in. They're listening to the people. And I think that's good diligence as a mayoral candidate, so thank all three of you guys for being here.
Anyone else?
Just a quick thing on the senior housing. I mean, representations made tonight about support of senior housing. Maybe it's time to kind of, do some research citywide for appropriate areas for senior housing, because to me that's one of the overriding issues. It's the consistency with the comp plan. Doesn't mean that this is the only place that senior housing can go. So, that's another part of what I'm processing. And this isn't, like I said, an easy decision. I think this will, again, I think that residents, referred sometimes as NIMBYs, not in my backyard. I think this is a little different situation. Hopefully it is. But obviously the residents in this part of that of town are against it. I could understand with this type of an impact. I would have concerns as well. But again, it's we're trying to make decisions that both respect the neighbors and respect the needs of the community as well, and that's why it's such a tough decision. So, thanks.
Anyone else? Call the roll.
The motion?
Sure. I'll just read the motion, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Everybody
Yeah,
read
I
the
know
motion?
it's been a long time. Okay.
It's not 2 hours, but that's okay. The motion before you is to approve first passage of the amendment to the zoning and land use code and map to contractually rezone the property at 209 Webster Street from the Neighborhood Conservation A District to the Office Residential District, subject to a contractual agreement, and to continue the public hearing for final passage to the next regularly scheduled City Council meeting. Okay? Counselor from Ward 7.
No.
Ward 1.
No.
Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
No.
Ward 5.
Yes.
Ward 6.
No.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Motion failed by a vote of 3 to 4.
We're going to have a 5-minute break. I didn't request
And
it.
as people are leaving,
5 minutes.
just so everybody's aware, that means that this item is effectively done. So it's over, no second reading, all done.
I didn't either.